Okay, so this is Bible study week 3, and today we will be going through Ecclesiastes, specifically Ecclesiastes 1 through 4. And I kind of want to talk about the overarching ideas of emptiness and loneliness. So, I probably are going to want to get a Bible on hand because I'm going to be reading through Ecclesiastes, so guess we'll just jump right in. So Ecclesiastes 1, well, let me give the background stuff. So the author of Ecclesiastes is Solomon, and he is known as like the man full of wisdom. He's the son of David in the Bible, and he's a very wise guy who got a lot of wealth and pleasure in his life. And Ecclesiastes is kind of like the last book he wrote before his death. Right, like he's the guy that wrote Proverbs, so like the daily wisdoms, and he wrote Song of Songs, which is like how to love each other in God's image. So I'm gonna try to break the study up, hopefully 4 chapters a week. I might post like 2 separate videos a week, maybe on Tuesdays. We'll see how it ends up going. But so yeah. I think I'm just going to jump right in with Ecclesiastes 1. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Israel. Absolute futility, says the teacher. Absolute futility. Everything is futile. What does a person gain for all his efforts that he labors at under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets. Panting, it returns to the place where it rises. Gusting to the south, turning to the north. Turning goes the wind, and the wind returns and it cycles. All the streams flow to the sea, and yet the sea is never full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are wearisome, more than anyone can say. The eye is not satisfied by seeing, or the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Can one say about anything, "Look, this is new"? It has already existed in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of those who came before, and of those who will come after there will also be no remembrance by those who follow them. I, the teacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem. I applied my mind to examine and explore through wisdom all that is done under heaven. God has given people this miserable task to keep them occupied. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun, and I have found everything to be futile, a pursuit of the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, "See, I have amassed wisdom far beyond all those who were over Jerusalem before me, and my mind has been thoroughly grasped by wisdom and knowledge. I applied my mind to know wisdom and knowledge, madness and folly. I learned that this too is a pursuit of the wind. For with much wisdom is much sorrow. As knowledge increases, grief also increases." So that is the kind of opening to the book. And a lot of people think this book is very nihilistic and very downtrodden, which is an understandable interpretation, but I don't believe that, and we're going to get into that a little bit later when we go over some other stuff. But so chapter 1's kind of about futility and the limitations of wisdom, and Solomon comes back to this idea of like wisdom isn't all, and wisdom shouldn't be all in your life, right? Do you want to be a theologian or do you want to be a saint, right? To know God, you have to know him with your heart, not just with your mind. And for Solomon, I feel like that really kind of strikes a chord for him, right? Because he's like the wisest man of all. So something before we kind of continue is this idea of hevel that I want to explain. So anytime I say the word meaningless, that is a translation of the word hevel. And hevel is kind of like smoke or like illusion. And it's like a wind, right? Like it's that feeling deep down inside when we're trying to do something and we achieve our goals, but it still just feels empty. It's that emptiness. It's the smoke. It's not really there. It's not really tangible. And something important about hevel is it's also the breath of life that God breathed into man. So it's not like it's completely useless. It has its purpose. And it's kind of important as we go through this to try to understand what hevel is and what its purpose is. So let's talk about the first half of the book here. So Ecclesiastes 1 through 8. So life without God is empty. Ecclesiastes 1:7, all streams flow to the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place where the streams flowed, there they flow again. So all streams flow to the sea is kind of, I see, like, all the temporariness of the world leads to God, and specifically leads to Jesus. And Ecclesiastes 1:8 also kind of speaks to a very relatable human feeling. All things are wearisome more than anyone can say. The eye is not satisfied by seeing, or the ear filled with hearing. So I feel like we've all kind of like felt like life can be tiring, life can be tough. And that was true for all time. I mean, even more so back then, right? When they just had to work just to survive on like a day-to-day basis. So it's important to know that like Solomon is relatable and he understands like human experience. So the second half of this is how a cyclical life, right? Like nothing is new under the sun. Everything that's existed has already existed and we don't have much of an impact. That can kind of lead you to a cynical attitude, right? Because it's like, what is my meaning? What is my purpose? Where do I fit into all of this? And Ecclesiastes touches on that later. But it's just important to keep that in mind, that if you get into this cycle in life, then it might turn you into a bit of a cynical person. We are created to pursue God and his glory, and with the increase of knowledge is also the increase of grief, right? For with much wisdom is much sorrow, and as knowledge increases, grief increases. So this to me kind of makes me think about ignorance is bliss. The less you know, the better off you are. Like, that's why it's important to protect children, right? Like, they don't know things, so they're innocent, so we shouldn't corrupt their innocence. And that can also kind of apply to childlike faith, right? Like, we don't have to know everything about God to be able to worship him and not understand him, but to be able to worship him and praise him. And that's kind of what the pursuit of wisdom is leaving out, right? Like the worship and the relationship with God. Something that I heard the other day when I was talking to my brother-in-law is, like, there are theologians who know more about the Bible than anyone else, but they're still atheists because they don't understand and know God. So the understanding of wisdom, madness, and folly is also a pursuit of the wind. It's also Hevel, right? Ecclesiastes 1:17, I apply my mind to know wisdom and knowledge, madness, and folly. This too is a pursuit of the wind. So it's kind of like understanding the human mind and the human condition isn't going to be like the main priority of what you should spend your time doing, right? Because that's what Hevel is. It's like something that everyone spends their time doing, or is like a purpose that you can pursue in life, but that purpose is always null and void without God. And the limitations of wisdom kind of strikes a chord with me specifically because that's kind of how I've always been in life, is like the young dude who's smart. So this book has really been a very personal experience for me. All right, so we'll go ahead and get into Ecclesiastes 2. So this is about the emptiness of worldly things and speaks more on wisdom. Ecclesiastes 2. I said to myself, go ahead, I will test you with pleasure, enjoy what is good. But it turned out to be futile. I said about laughter, it is madness, and about pleasure, what does this accomplish? I explored with my mind the pull of wine on my body, my mind still guiding me with wisdom and how to grasp folly, until I could see what is good for people to do under heaven during the few days of their lives. I increased my achievements. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made gardens and parks for myself and planted every kind of fruit tree in them. I constructed reservoirs for myself from which to irrigate a grove of flourishing trees. I acquired male and female servants and had slaves who